Usury, your bank and you. Who has heard of the word usury before? Okay, let's get into it. Quick intro, Daniel Prince, Choose Life. I have the book out there. It's selling for €20. I will sign it for you and put the block height on. And this is my podcast, Once Bitten. My daughter is there, and she asks the first question on every show. Yes, she has interviewed Michael Saylor and asked him his favorite Christmas present. So that's the level of the depth that we get into with our guests. So usury, it's a noun. It's the practice of lending money and charging the borrower interest, especially at an exorbitant or illegally high rate. Everybody is probably familiar with the idea of interest. Who has a mortgage? Who has interest to pay on their car, on their sofa, or whatever? We've all been there, right? So let's get this. We'll come back to this example. So it's derived from the Latin word usura. The practice of usury has been discussed amongst philosophers, economists, and religions for thousands of years. Aristotle discussed usura in his book Politic in the year 350 BC, where he outlined there were 3 ways to make money. So let's look at those 3 ways. Knowledge of livestock. Which are most profitable and where? What sort of horses or sheep or oxen or any other animals are most likely to give a return? A man ought to know which of these pay better than others and which pay best in particular places, for some do better in one place and some in another. So that's 1, have knowledge of your livestock. 2, service for hire. We all know this. You can be employed in the mechanical arts, the other in unskilled, unbodily labor. You are selling your time and your energy in return for a salary. 3, usury. Usury makes a gain out of the money itself and not from the natural object of it. This is Aristotle. Money was intended to be used as a medium of exchange. We've talked about that earlier on the panel, but not to earn interest. This term interest is applied to the breeding of money because the offspring resembles the parent. Therefore, of all the modes of getting wealth, this is the most unnatural. So no holding back there from Aristotle, talking about usury, lending money and then charging interest to get that back. Religion, let's go down the rabbit hole of religion. What does religion have to say about usury? So we have here from Exodus, if you lend money to any of my people with you who is poor, you shall not be like a moneylender to him, and you shall not exact interest from him. This is from Deuteronomy. You shall not charge interest on loans to your brother, interest on money, interest on food, interest on anything that is lent for interest. Islam, an exploitative means of increasing one's wealth. Many of you might have heard about halal or the system of riba in the Muslim faith. The usury is completely frowned upon. Another Islam. O you who have believed, fear Allah and give up what remains due to you of interest. He's saying, wipe out all the debts. Buddha, one discerns wrong livelihood as wrong livelihood and right livelihood as right livelihood. And what is wrong livelihood? Scheming, persuading, hinting, belittling, and charging interest. This is wrong livelihood. So how do we now live in a world where usury is used in society every second of every day? And how has that system been created? What are we living under? This book was recommended to me by this fine gentleman on the sound, read Symphony. And spoiler alert, it's not a book. It's a transcript. A conversation took place, and it took place in 1938 between Gavril Kusmin, who was Stalin's top NKVD agent and key interrogator during the show trials. It was up to him to get the confessions out of the Trotskyites before they were hung the next day. They wanted all of the information. He came up against Rakovsky. Rakovsky was the Russian ambassador to France and was to be executed the next day unless he could disclose some information that would save his life, that would be in use to Stalin. That's the only way that he was going to save himself from the gallows. Landowski, who is the author of the book, he's only the author because he transcribed it. He was in charge. His role as the chief torturer, he was kidnapped from his family by the NKVD because he was the best biochemist in his field, and they were looking for the truth serum. They were looking for that chemical that was they could inject into somebody that they could get all of the truth out of. Now, in this particular case, all Rakowski had to do was keep pouring a little bit of red wine into Rakowski's glass to get him talking, to make him feel comfortable. The conversation took place in French. The three of them could speak French to a very high level, and when you read the book, you'd understand it. Obviously, you read it in English or your own language. It's been translated into many different languages. So what he learned through the conversation was so incredible to him that he kept a copy. He was asked to transcribe it from French, translate it from French to Russian, but he kept copies. And that was discovered on his dead body years later when he was past his sell-by date, sent off to the gulags, and it was actually Spanish soldiers that found him. They found the documents around his body, and they took it back. They gave it to a university professor in Spain who started translating all of this stuff. The book's incredible. You have to go and dig it out. So I'm going to start going through a few of the lines and the paragraphs in the book that are pertinent to this discussion. This is what he was telling, Rakowski was telling the interrogator. I only want to decipher the basic axiom. Money is power. Money is today the center of global gravity. This is what the people that are in control of this system believe. This is where they are coming from. Money is power. It is clear that in your imagination, he's talking to his interrogator, there immediately appeared pictures of real money, of metal paper, but that is not so. They, who are they? They created credit money with a view to making its volume close to infinite and to give it the speed of sound. It is an abstraction, a being of thought, a figure, number, credit. 1938. This was taking place, this conversation. So the system is already decades old at this point. Banks, the stock exchanges, and the whole world financial system is a gigantic machine for the purpose of bringing about unnatural scandals. According to Aristotle's expression, he quotes Aristotle. This is from the conversation. This is from the transcript. To force money to produce money. That is something that if it is a crime in economics, then in relations to finances, it is a crime against the criminal code since it is usury. So they are creating money out of nothing and then charging you interest on it. Hold that thought in your mind. Bearing in mind that lawful interest is fixed not on real capital, but on non-existing capital, the interest is illegal by so many times as the fictional capital is greater than the real one. There's a lot to unpack there. So I'll keep going on. We will come back to these quotes. So imagine to yourself, and again, this is still from the book. This is still from the guy who's being tortured with the red wine to give up the truth to the interrogator. Imagine to yourself, if you can, a small number of people having unlimited power through the possession of real wealth, and you will see that they are the absolute dictators of the stock exchange, and as a result of this, also the dictators of production, distribution, and also of work and consumption. They can control everything by these levers that they are in charge of. If you have enough imagination, then multiply this by the global factor. So we have monopoly in money creation. Who has that monopoly today? It's the central banks. We talked about this earlier on the panel. The central banks, they can create this whenever they want. And they don't need it back. They don't want it back. So if you have a monopoly in money creation, what do you get on the other side of that? Well, we get the clown world in which we live to today. We live under deception. It's criminal. It's unethical. There's a rot in society. So the current financial system is there to inflate the amount of money in the system and debase the purchasing power of every single one of our euros or pounds or dollars, depending on what currency you are forced to use as a medium of exchange, is being debased. Your property is not going up in value, never has done. The purchasing power of your euro is being eroded every day. So let's take an everyday example that many people can connect with. Taking out a mortgage for a home. First of all, the cost of that house is exorbitant. It's ridiculous. I think we're all in agreement there. You have to make a deposit. That deposit will probably represent 10 to 15 years of hard work just for you to make a deposit to earn your right to cross the line to go and see the loan manager, to even entertain, God forbid, that you should want your own shelter. Then the bank only has to keep a fraction. This is what Knut was talking about earlier. You give up your money to the bank, it becomes the bank's money. They only have to keep 10% of that. This is the Federal Reserve. March 15th, 2020, they made this announcement. Reserve requirements, as announced on March 15th, the board reduced reserve requirement ratios to 0% effective March 26th. This action eliminated reserve requirements for all depository institutions. They don't have to keep anything there. This is absolute insanity. Banks do not use depositors' money to issue loans, and you can read the book here by Rune Osgaard, Fraudcoin, 1,000 Years with Inflation as a Policy, and it's a beautiful book. It takes you all the way from the Viking Age all the way up to, so if you're a history geek, you're going to love it. And he pulled out from the Bank of England. We're going to go through this. So this report is called, and you can Google this, Money Creation in the Modern Economy. If you go to the Bank of England website, you can download the PDF. So from this particular article, one common misconception is that banks act simply as intermediaries, lending out the deposits that savers place with them. So we're led to believe, I deposit in the bank, they're going to look after it for me, they're going to invest in the economy, I'm going to get, it's going to be kept safe, I'm going to get a little bit of interest back, and this is how the world revolves. Again, from the same report, the Bank of England. Indeed, viewing banks simply as intermediaries ignores the fact that in reality, in the modern economy, commercial banks are the creators of deposit money. This article explains how, rather than banks lending out deposits that are placed with them, the act of lending creates deposits, the reverse of the sequence typically described in textbooks. What? That's the Bank of England telling you your PhD economists are full of shit. The reverse of the sequence typically described in textbooks. They said the quiet part out loud. The Bank of England, these three mega brains that went through this report and taught you how the money comes in. So then you get to the multiplier effect. You have the initial deposit. The larger amounts of money in circulation, because they can then loan out, as Knut said earlier, like 90% of that just gets rehypothecated, loaned. More loans are taken out by individuals. This doesn't stop. Residential properties rise in price. Now apply this on a grand scale, if you can. Like if he said, the guy being in Rakowski said, if you have the imagination, apply this on a grand scale. This is happening every minute of every day. Look. Car, education, babies, home improvements, career, new work, engagement, health. People are taking loans out every single second of every day. That is increasing the credit in the system. At one point, that money is going to have to be printed into the system. Sorry, Christine. It's not transitory, it's forever. Inflation is forever. Debasement of the euro is forever. Losing purchasing power is forever. So inflation, this is how they describe it in the economics books. Aggregate quantity of goods demanded at any particular price level is greater than the aggregate quantity of goods supplied at that price level. That's what they teach our PhDs. So let's get back to the example of the mortgage. Your deposit has been made. Bank creates a deposit in your bank account for the transaction. This loan is what they will charge you interest on. This is usury in its purest form. There was no money. It's just been created. The loan was the deposit for you to go and buy the house. And now you're locked in for 25 years, paying 5, 6, 7%. It doesn't matter if it's 0.5% and you think you've got a good deal. It's usury if it's charged on money that didn't exist in the first place. Going back to what Rakowski said, bearing in mind that lawful interest is fixed not on real capital but on non-existing capital, the interest is illegal by so many times as the fictional capital is greater than the real one. It's usurious and criminal. There's no other way to put it. Well, I'm going to put it another way. The bank counterfeits the money, then charges you interest on it. A scheme to enrich those who issue loans from thin air. So why haven't we fought against this before? One guy did. Credit River case. It's a classic name. It couldn't be more apt. The Credit River. Known as the Credit River case, the basic facts of this December 1968 case are fairly straightforward. The defendant, Jerome Daly, owned a property in Scott County, Minnesota, on which he had a mortgage which the plaintiff, First National Bank of Montgomery, that was owned by J.P. Morgan, by the way. Daly fell behind on his mortgage payments, leading to the bank to foreclose on the property. The bank sought to evict him and take possession of the property. He was a lawyer. He represented himself and based his defense on the argument that the bank had not actually loaned him any money, but had simply created credit on its books. He argued that the bank had not given him anything of value and accordingly was not entitled to take the property away from him that was securing the loan. Good old Daly. The jury and the justice of the peace, Martin v. Mahoney, agreed with his argument in court. They returned a verdict for the defendant, and the justice of the peace found the mortgage null and void, declaring that the bank was not entitled to possession of the property. They upheld his argument because it was the truth. They had created the money out of thin air. The decision meant Daly did not have to pay the mortgage nor relinquish his property. This is what he said. This is in the newspapers. New York Times, this was his statement. This decision, which is legally sound, has the effect of declaring all private mortgages on real and personal property and all U.S. and state bonds held by the Federal Reserve, national and state banks to be null and void. This amounts to the emancipation of this nation from personal, national, and state debt purportedly owed to this banking system. Every American owes it to himself to study this decision very carefully, for upon it hangs the question of freedom or slavery. 1968. This was his comments after he won this case. The decision was nullified on the grounds that as justice of the peace, Martin v. Mahoney lacked the authority to enter such a ruling. The district court agreed, meaning that Daly had to pay the mortgage debt or relinquish the property to the bank. These motherfuckers. Shh. These motherfuckers. They're laughing at us every day. This is what we're up against. They just overturn the decision on a technicality that he's just a justice of the peace. He can't rule over such an important case such as this. Daly was disbarred. He couldn't practice law anymore, lost his career. Then guess what happened? Shh. The justice of the peace, Mahoney, was found dead on 22nd of August, 1969. The circumstances surrounding his death remain unresolved. Allegedly, he died on a fishing trip, a solo fishing trip. He went out alone to fish with a bunch of beers, got intoxicated, fell overboard, found on the shore, age 55. This and many other stories can be found in this book, again, recommended to me by Sir Badders over there, by John Hamer, Behind the Curtain. So what can you do to protect yourself against this? You opt out. You stop using their money. Under this regime, which is the same in almost all countries worldwide, we stand no chance of true prosperity and ethical distribution of wealth. Entrepreneurs, savers, consumers are left without any apparent signal, no real idea of value, and no guiding star. We have yet to learn what a truly civilized world could look like because the monetary system is civilization's foundation. A medium of exchange is so important. That is what we base all of our economical decision-making on. And the legal system and everything else is built on top of that, on top of money. Money, everything is downstream of money. To ensure prosperity, we must design a completely different form of money that stores value rather than loses value over time. A monetary system beyond the control of any centralized power. A money that is global and available without permission. A store of value that becomes increasingly scarce over time. A money that could be sent digitally to cater for the needs of people living in a modern, interconnected, and highly interdependent civilization, a new form of medium of exchange. Thankfully, that money has been available to us since 3rd of January, 2009. The money is Bitcoin. Thank you.